Hello, everyone, and welcome to Civilization 6 The Basics. Thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. And I must say, it is really exciting to finally be diving into the world of tutorial videos for this game. It is one of my very favorite games of all time. I love hearing about other people enjoying this game, and I've been asked more times than you could possibly imagine about tutorial videos, if I have any to watch, or if not, am I going to make them? Well, this is tutorial video number 1, so let's get started. Now, before we do dive in, I just want to clarify a few things about this video and what you can expect to see. This video is intended to help people with the most basic concepts of Civilization 6. People who have never played the game before, or who have played a few times but are struggling to understand some of the things that they are seeing, will certainly get the most out of this video. As for people with a fair amount of experience in the game, who've gotten their fair share of victories, you may hear a lot of things that you already knew, but I'll be touching on some basic strategies and helpful tips that may be things you hadn't thought of in the past, which could help improve your gameplay. Now, for those of you with hundreds of hours of Civilization 6 gameplay under your belts and are playing at an advanced level at higher difficulties, while you may enjoy watching this video, it is unlikely you'll get much value from the tips and strategies that we'll be discussing. But keep in mind that I have a lot of tutorials and strategy guides in the works, and depending on when you're seeing this, they may already be available on my channel. And if not, they will be soon. And one final thing I do want to point out about the basics tutorial is that I've set the game back to the original vanilla rule set so that anyone who may not have the expansions won't be seeing an interface with a lot of symbols and buttons that are completely foreign to them. Now, those of you who do have some or all of the DLCs and expansions can rest assured that everything that we'll be talking about today in this video is completely 100% applicable to the game, regardless of the version that you are playing. So with that said, let the teaching begin. And the first thing I'd like to discuss is a couple of adjustments that you may not be aware of that you can make to your user interface to make the game a lot easier. So, first things first, let's jump up here to the options menu right here. And you're going to go to the interface section on the left hand side, and you're going to want to go to show yields in HUD, heads up display, ribbon. Now the default is always hide or off. And what I want you to do is come down here and turn it on to always show. Now you could choose to put it on show on mouse over, but for me, unless you're really, worried about having too much clutter on your screen or something like that, if it bothers you, you can put it on mouse over. But I like to have it available to see at all times because I'm constantly checking in on it. So click it on always show and then just go confirm. And just like that, you will see a little ribbon down below your leader. And of course, as you meet more leaders, you'll see their information as well. And that is extremely valuable to know throughout the game. All right. Now, the other thing I do want to show you real quick is you're going to want to come down here to map options. And you're going to see show yield icons under this. And you're going to want to click this on. Now, another thing you could do is use the hotkey, which a lot of you probably would prefer. And that is just to click the Y button and turns them on and off, just like that. Having these yield icons on is extremely valuable. It's going to be the information that you learn from this is essential throughout the game at all times. Having it turned off for aesthetic purposes, sure. Maybe if you're an expert and you like seeing the aesthetics of having it turned off, that's perfectly fine. But knowing at all times what's happening on the screen is extremely important. Now that we've done that, let's start by talking about the first steps of gameplay. And the first thing you're going to do in any Civilization game is decide where your capital is going to be. Now, there are a lot of factors that can go into deciding where to settle a city, particularly your capital. And the truth is, a lot of times there isn't just one correct answer. However, we're here to talk about the basics. So what are the basics when it comes to settling a city? Well, the first thing is fresh water. And you can gain fresh water in a city by settling on either a river or next to a lake. And you can see this graphically by coming down here to the bottom left-hand corner by your map and clicking on the lenses and clicking on the settler lens. And this graphic very clearly shows you the darker green is where you have fresh water anywhere along a river or next to a lake. There are obviously a lot of tiles that aren't next to water. And also, you can't see them here, but there is coastal water, which provides +1 housing. However, as you can see, +3 housing is what we're after with fresh water. And you can see that all along this river and next to this lake, there is fresh water. And if you're wondering about housing, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the future, but just know that the more housing a city has, the faster it can grow to higher populations, which makes sense. So we know that if we settle anywhere along this river or even over here next to this lake, we're going to have fresh water. So what's the next thing? The next thing is, will our city have good tiles to work? And what I mean by that is, our city is going to have population, and that population is going to be able to work the tiles that are within the borders of the city. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want your population to be working tiles that have more good things than others. So obviously on this tile, you're only going to be working 2 food and absolutely no production. Whereas on this tile, it's 2 food and 2 production, as you can see when you hover over it. So you're going to want to make sure that when you settle your city, your citizens are going to have good options on where to work. And early on in a game, anytime you can have a citizen working on a tile that has 2 food and 2 production, or known as a 2-2 tile, that is fantastic. There's also other good examples like this 3 food, 1 production, and 1 gold tile is also very good. That's our luxury up there. And there's a 2-2 over here. Sometimes you'll see a tile that has 1 food and 3 production, which is also very good. But having more production and food on the tiles that your citizens are working is good, so keep that in mind. And finally, we're also going to want to talk about resources. In particular, when you're settling your capital, you're going to be looking at your luxury resources that you can see here, which is the furs. And then there's a bonus resource here of stone, and another bonus over here is cattle. Now we'll discuss a little bit later why it's nice to have bonus resources in the area like cattle and the stone, but for now, just know that having them available in your capital is good. And of course, having a luxury resource in your capital is extremely important because luxuries equals amenities, and amenities equals happy citizens. Happy citizens means more output. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over here to the right. And when I do so, I'm actually going to use up 2 movement. You're going to see their movement cost equals 2. And the reason why is because it's a marsh. Now what's going to happen is because this unit only has 2 movement, it's going to take up the entire turn. Okay? Now that I've done that, I won't be able to settle this turn. So this is going to be what we call a turn to settle. But I didn't want to settle on this tile that I just vacated because if I had, then the trees would have disappeared. It would have just been a normal 2-1 tile, but that would have been the city center, and I would no longer have had the ability to work that tile with citizens in the future. Now when I settle the city on this marsh, I'll actually be able to work that tile. And as you can see, I'll still have this tile in the future, and this tile in the future, and the cattle's going to be right next to me, which is good. And of course, we also have some hills, which you'll see in the future is also very good. Now, another thing you could have done, and I would have done it normally, but it wouldn't have made any difference in the decision, but sometimes by moving your warrior first, you can help gain more perspective on where the best place to settle would be. In this case, if I had stepped here, I wouldn't have learned anything new. If I step here, I can see it's already desert, and I'm not going to get any new information by stepping anywhere else. So I step here, we see there's more desert, the river continues down here, that's fine. That could actually be a valuable location for a city in the future if you build a particular wonder, but that's okay. The most important thing is this is where we're going to settle. So I'm going to hit next turn, and when it pops up, we're going to click on the city and found the city right there. You can see the marsh will be removed, and we're going to have 2 food and 1 production inside the capital tile. But when you click on the city and then you come down here to manage citizens, you will see that that tile right there is being worked as a 2-2 tile. And then eventually as the borders grow, we'll be able to work that tile, and there's other good tiles in the area that we can improve and make even better. Okay then, so we've settled our capital. What's next? Well, the first thing we're going to want to do is take a look at what we're going to be producing in our capital city. And you can see on the right hand side what our choices are, and most of the time the best choice is a scout. It's not to say it's the only choice. There is an argument to be made to build a warrior or a slinger in order to give yourself a little bit more military might early in the game. But for the most part, I believe that the value that comes from getting a slinger built and exploring the lands around you, it far outweighs any other choice. But it's not to say that some of the other choices are incorrect. It's just a style of play. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to want to choose your research. Now, when you go to your culture tree, you're going to see that the first thing you always research is always Code of Laws. Once that's done, then you will be making decisions. But for the science tree, over here, we're actually going to have some choices. We can choose any one of these 5 here. Now, what I like to do when telling people how to choose what the best thing to research is early on is take a look at the land around you. All right. So this here requires animal husbandry in order to improve this tile. As well, our luxury also requires animal husbandry. And then over here, this stone requires mining to build the quarry on it. Just like that. So what happens is I like to try and choose the research that's going to benefit the tiles around me the most. Because what can happen is, if you get lucky and find a goody hut when you're exploring, it could actually give you a free builder. And so what you want to do is you want to do research that will, as quickly as possible, allow you to improve a tile. So when we come in here, if I were to choose pottery, then that would not give me something that I could do with my builder. So for instance, with getting animal husbandry, I could improve both the cattle and the furs. By getting mining, I can build a quarry and improve the stone. But pottery wouldn't help me. So I always try to choose something that's actually going to help me. So I'm going to say animal husbandry because that allows me to improve 2 tiles once complete, including our luxury good. So animal husbandry would be the choice. If we didn't have stuff that was like you used animal husbandry, perhaps you would choose mining instead. Now, the final thing before you end this turn is you're going to have to move your warrior. And when exploring and moving around, first of all, I like to not move my warrior too far from my capital. If for some reason barbarians popped up in the area and started moving towards your capital, you wouldn't want your warrior, which is your strongest unit at the moment, to be a long ways away. So I try to just use my warrior to explore the immediate area in and around my capital to start with. And when choosing where to move, you're going to want to keep in mind that being on hills gives you greater vision than being on flat land like this. And you'll see this blue line that surrounds your warrior, and that tells you your options for the distance that you could actually travel to. And clearly here, the best choice is to step onto this hill. So let's go ahead and step on that hill, and then we can end our turn. So, it's turn 8, and our warrior has done some exploring to the north. In addition to finding a goody hut, or a tribal village, he has also discovered a natural wonder and a science city-state living beneath it, which is really valuable. As you can see by clicking on the city-state icon over here, you'll see that Mitla, since we've met them first, we got a free envoy, which means we're getting bonus science in our capital. And of course, the more science we get, the faster we research through our science technology tree, which is very good. We're now making 4.9 science per turn versus 1.3 culture per turn. We'll discuss a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Now, our scout is also complete. And since our warrior is going to be able to explore most of the surrounding area over here to the north and to the east, I think it's most valuable for our scout if we headed south to see what's going on around this lake and then potentially headed to the west. So in order to get there, we're going to cross the river. And because the river is adjacent to the city and we're leaving the city center, we won't be penalized 3 movement score for crossing the river. If we were trying to move from this tile to this tile, it would cost us 3 movement and we would be completely done for movement. But we're leaving a city center. We'll cross over here. And as we go to the south, you will actually... Wow. Okay. So we're learning lots of stuff. We can see here the borders of a city-state to the south. And we've learned that we've got horses down here to the south as well. Now, if you are playing with expansions on, then this horse would actually not be here until animal husbandry has been discovered. But because we're playing on the basic rules, we're actually able to see the horses already. Now, what to build next? Conventional wisdom, from my perspective, is that you should always try to build a settler as quickly as possible. In Civilization 6, there's not much more you can learn that's more important than build lots of cities and build them as soon as possible. So, building a settler, allowing you to build your second city, is extremely important. But since the scout finished one turn faster than our population grew, we still are not at population 2, and we're not able to start that. So one thing you could do is choose to build something else, and when that's complete, then start the settler. Or what we're going to do is I'm going to choose to build something else, and then when we go to the next turn, we'll switch to the settler and save that production in that previous build. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to choose monument, which is a very valuable thing to get early on because of the culture. And culture early in the game is extremely important in order to work through the technology tree. Again, we'll discuss that in a little bit. So for one turn, I'm going to work the monument. And so what I will do is I'll hit next turn. And we've just met Hunza down here. So we're going to click that and remove those. And so again, because it was a first meet, we got a bonus of 1 envoy, meaning we're now getting +4 gold in the capital city. So you can see here our gold is now up to 9.4 per turn. And so now we want to continue to move around and learn about what's going on around the area. So I'm going to move down to the south here and move around the city and try to learn as much as we can. We can see here that there's a river available here, and so likely that river continues to the north, perhaps an opportunity to build a city over there in the very near future. Also, we don't want to forget, now that we're at population 2, we can switch back over and go to our settler, which is what I want to do. Because getting that city built as fast as possible allows you to start snowballing the effects of having that city built. And we'll just move our warrior down here. It's turn 16, and in addition to getting some more exploring done, we have finished researching Code of Laws. And researching Code of Laws is going to allow us to implement our very first government policies. So let's discuss. We are given 4 options for policies and 2 slots to put them in. And as you can see, the corresponding colors means these 2 can be played in the military policy slots, and these 2 gold ones can be played in the economic policy slots. So there's 2 choices here for military. There's +5 unit combat strength when fighting barbarians, and there's double experience for recon units. There is some value in having this on, especially if you have a couple of scouts out there and you're trying to get them promoted so that they can move around the map easier. But primarily, particularly if you're a new player and you're just a little bit nervous about barbarians, this is absolutely the right choice most of the time. Particularly because we've actually discovered 2 barbarian huts in the area, so we're going to want to be strong against them for sure. And then there's the other option. Now, this is a little bit of an interesting one because urban planning, which is plus production in all cities, is generally speaking the best one, especially once you've got 2 or 3 cities down. But this +1 faith and +1 gold in the capital is key because if you have no other source of generating faith, which we currently do not, as you can see, then that +1 faith will eventually get us enough faith to purchase a pantheon. Now that's, you may be aware of what those are or not, but that's something that we'll discuss a little bit later. But if you do not choose this card and you do not find any other source of faith, then you can go any number of turns before you ever get your pantheon, because you have to have 25 faith in order to purchase it. So it kind of forces your hand to use God King right out of the gate if you have no other choice or no other source of faith. So we'll choose God King in this case, but as soon as we get the faith required in order to get our pantheon, we would definitely want to switch back to urban planning because +1 production in your cities is definitely more valuable than this overall, because production is king. So we'll confirm those policies just like that. And as you can see here, we've actually got a goodie hut that we can step on. So let's go over here And the villagers share the secrets of the well-organized community. Your progress towards military tradition has advanced considerably. All right, so a little bit of a tech boost there. Now, it's time to choose a technology, and it's also time we can discuss the importance of these little boosts that we just got. So we just got a boost for clearing a barbarian outpost. Now, not particularly valuable because we probably would have cleared a barbarian outpost anyway, but we won't argue. So, you'll see here it says 2 boost, improve 3 tiles. 2 boost, discover a second continent. And each of these says 2 boost, 2 boost, 2 boost. And in the civics tree, these are referred to as inspirations. So if you complete this, your people will be inspired to get more, to get a bonus towards actually completing that research. Now, in the base game, before you have any expansions, the bonus is 50%. Once you have expansions put in place, there was an amendment put in that in the rules that actually changed it to be 40% boost. In either case, it is an incredibly valuable boost. So if you take this, for instance, this craftsmanship takes 40 culture to achieve, right? Currently, we're producing 1.6. But if we improve 3 tiles, then we can actually cut that cost in half or by 40%. So you're talking about between 16 and 20 culture, depending on which version you're playing, for free just by doing this. If you don't do this, then you're giving that culture up. And right now, that's more than 10 turns worth of culture by doing this. If we could cut it in half, it would take 12 turns instead of 24. So you can start to see the value of that. And every one of these civics has one. Meet 3 city-states. Boost the target of be the target of a declaration of war. All the way through, there are these bonuses. And the same goes in the science technology tree. Outside of these first 3, they all have a boost. Farmer resource, meeting other civilization, killing with a slinger. And every one of these gives you bonus of cutting, in this case, cutting the cost in half or by 40% if you have expansions. And you cannot underestimate how incredibly valuable that is. So in every circumstance, you should always be doing everything you can to try to get boosts completed. Now, there are going to be times when you just simply can't. Maybe you can't. Maybe you just never find another continent in time. Or perhaps you're not on the water and you just can't get 2 galleys built in time. Or you just don't have 2 resources available to improve. Like, there's times when you're not going to get them. You're not going to try to get every single one. But it is worth going out of your way, spending money, doing a number of different things in order to make sure you get as many of these done as possible. So try to keep an eye on those. It's a little bit of an advanced tip. I know it's a lot to worry about. There's a lot going on here, and you're like, oh my god, you need me to do all that? That's crazy. You don't have to do all of it, but keep an eye on it, and it can make a big difference in how quickly things get done. So just a little thought to make sure you're paying attention to that, because it's not insignificant. So in this case, we have not discovered a second continent or improved 3 tiles. I'm going to go ahead and start craftsmanship, and hopefully we can get a builder and get 3 tiles improved in time to reduce the actual cost to this. Because you can reduce the time, even though I've started it, you can still get the reduction, even though we've already started it. So we'll try that one, and we'll move on. And we can move our scout here, and I'm just going to jump on this hill, see what we see. Another big desert down here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our settler is built, and it's time to decide where our second city is going to live. And when we click on the settler, it will bring up the lens automatically. And as you can see, there's plenty of locations that would satisfy our first criteria, which is fresh water. And then we have to decide, what do we have for resources, and what do we have for good tiles to work. Now, up here, where this desert is, as I said before, there is a wonder called Petra. And the Petra wonder can be amazing. But you don't want that to be your second city, because if you build a city up here, as you can see, you're going to be working a lot of bad tiles for a long, long time. And there's not a lot of value in that city to start with. That's more of a luxury type city that you'll build maybe as your 4th city or 3rd or 4th city. And then you just try to push towards getting that built, and then that city can carry you through it the rest of the game. But you want your second city to be quite valuable, almost like a pseudo capital, if you will. And down here, there's not a lot of great tiles. There's the horses, which isn't bad, and the copper. It'll certainly make for a solid city, but there's not a lot of chops, trees, and stuff like that to do. So what I would prefer to do is to take a look at the two cities over here. Now this city up here, there's a really good option to settle on this rice. And what I do about that is it's going to bring in a couple of different luxuries. It's going to bring in 2 copies of pearls, and it's also going to bring in these truffles, which is a nice tile as well with those 3 gold right out of the gate. And there's also a 2-2 tile here and a number of hills in the area. And you always want to be looking for hills because you can eventually put mines on those, which make them much more productive. Whereas a flat piece of land, not a whole lot you can do to add production to it. So that's a good solid choice. The other choice is down here where we have discovered a really, really good tile. And generally speaking, I try to let the good tiles dictate where I go when it's kind of a 50-50 decision. And this really good tile combined with this really good tile, and there's stone over here which can be improved, and there's another luxury down here as well, the mercury, which we can mine. I feel like settling somewhere over in this area on this lake is probably the better choice. It's close. I mean, you could go to either one and you'd be doing perfectly fine. Might not be much difference at all. But I think I'd probably choose this one and then do a third city there and then move on potentially to build this Petra city and fill in this area and then move beyond those borders. So let's move towards there. And I think quite clearly the choice would be to settle here. You don't want to settle on the fur because you actually want to be able to improve that tile with a worker and then have your population be working that tile on a turn-by-turn basis. So we're going to step here and we'll just skip the rest of that turn. We're going to want to get over this hill and come down in here and settle up. And now I want to discuss production. There's a couple of options. We do need a builder. Particularly, as you can see, we need to improve 3 tiles in order to get the craftsmanship boost. And we also want to have tiles that are better in order to make our city more productive. But one thing that I will say is that when you're making a lot of gold, and you can see up here that we're making 11.5 gold per turn, particularly valuable because we've got gold on a tile here, and we are also getting 4 gold per turn because we have an envoy with Hunza. So with all that gold and the Goody Hut gold that we brought in, we've got well over 250 gold here now, and it's continuing to go up quickly. And one of the very valuable things you can do with gold is to purchase builders. Because it gets them online quickly, you get the movements, you get the charges, which you can improve tiles with. And the faster you do that, the faster your city is working better tiles. So I'm going to go ahead and purchase this builder for 200 gold. Now we could have gone ahead and just built it, but that would have taken us about 8 turns. And in those 8 turns, we could finish our monument. And we are in particular trouble when it comes to culture right now. So getting this monument built and getting the additional culture from it is extremely valuable. So I'm going to go ahead and click monument here. I believe that's the very, very important decision to make here. Because as I said, you can come over here to our civics tree, and we are making 1.6 culture per turn, which is very poor. That's essentially what you start with. And it's taking a long time to get anywhere. And we can more than double our culture in 8 turns by getting that. Because one of the things that you have to consider in this game, and I'm going to keep this conversation as basic as I can, but it's a very important point I think you should know from the beginning. From start to finish, production is king. You'll hear that expression a lot. Production is king. Getting lots of cities built so that you can have lots of cities producing lots of production is essential from the start to the finish of the game. Production is king. Gets all the things done when you've got production. But if you're going to break it down to a more granular situation, there probably isn't anything more important than culture early in the game. On a standard speed game, the first 50 turns of any game is the most important 50 turns you're ever going to have. The things you do in the first 50 turns is going to set up everything that happens for the rest of the game. Once you've played 200 turns, 250 turns, most of the game's result is kind of set in stone, and it's just, doing a few things here and there at the end. But the things you do at the beginning is the most important. And we've already gone 22 turns making the bare minimum culture. So waiting to make that monument is something we cannot do right now, because it is taking us forever to do this. So you can imagine if we go from 1.6 to 3.6 culture per turn by building that monument, all of a sudden these are going to take less than 20 turns as opposed to 42. And then, as of course, we're going to want to continue to add more and more culture when we build more cities and get more things done, because it's all about racing to political philosophy. The faster you can get to political philosophy and get your new government, the better. That is one of the benchmarks of this game, is getting to political philosophy and choosing a new government, which is typically classical republic, but sometimes if you're going to war, it's oligarchy. Being able to have 4 government policies and the bonuses that come with classic republic, instead of having to be in your original government with only 2 policy cards, the differences between that and one another are huge. And if you have really good culture early in the game, you can get there by turn 40, turn 45. But if you have really poor culture and you don't do anything about it, it might take you to turn 70 or 75 or even worse. So you could be talking about a difference of 20 to 30 turns of not working a better government and better policies. And the difference between those two things is immense. So you should always be trying to find ways to up your game when it comes to culture. So getting your monuments built is the absolute utmost importance. Okay, so it's time to settle our second city. So let's go ahead and click the button. And it's time also to choose what to produce in that city. And the choice is almost always monument. There is very rare instances where I would say that a new city would choose anything other than monument. And there's 2 reasons for it. The first reason, of course, is as we just discussed, working through the civics tree, particularly early in the game, is unbelievably important. So that bonus to culture to get us to political philosophy as fast as possible is incredibly important, and you do not want to delay that. The second thing is that the manner in which the borders of a city expands is based off of the amount of culture that city produces. And the capital produces more culture because it has a palace, and the palace produces culture, so the borders expanded much more quickly. Whereas in a city other than the capital, those borders will not expand with that culture from the palace. So when you get the culture from the monument, you are going to be much better off in terms of border expansion. And expanding your borders to better tiles around the outside of your city is extremely important so that your citizens will be able to work better tiles as the game goes on. So those are 2 very good reasons why you go monument first. Another thing I wanted to discuss real quickly is the builders that I've got going on. The builder I've got going on here and the charges and what to do with them. So I'm going to start by building the mine on the quarry. And what it's going to do is it's going to give me this bonus right here, build a quarry. And so you're going to see this masonry go from this much done all the way around to here. And it's going to go from 10 turns down to like 5 turns left or something like that. Or even less than that, probably like 3 turns left or something. So I'm going to click that. Boom, masonry boost completed. And there you go. Right in the middle. 4 turns left. And so doing that saved us all that science. The next thing I'll do is I'll come over here and I'll create a camp on the firs, which will give us access to the luxury and also give that tile more gold, which is greater yield of gold throughout the game. And then I'll probably also bring them down here to build the pasture on this horse. Now I could have built the pasture here on this cattle, but the capital's got some pretty good tiles already, and I wanted this second city to have 2 really good tiles. The first tile, of course, is this one here, and then if I build a pasture here, this is going to be 3 food and 2 production, and that'll be 2 really solid tiles that the city can grow off of for the foreseeable future by working those. And also because the horse is a strategic resource, which will allow you to build horsemen units later on, whereas putting it on the cattle doesn't really give you an advantage like that at all. And building the pasture, as opposed to building the other fur, building on the fur, is that you can come out here and you'll see that there's a bonus for horseback riding of build a pasture. So as soon as we build a pasture, we'll get that boost to horseback riding, just like that. All right. So horseback riding gets completed and we'll be all happy about it. However, if I went and did this fur and then came over and did this fur and didn't do the pasture, then we wouldn't have gotten that boost. So that's why we decided to improve this one instead of the fur or any other one. Okay guys, so there's a couple of things I want to talk about here. They're a little bit on the micromanagement side, but they are relatively basic ideas that I think it's important to point out so that you guys can see some of the relatively easy strategies that you can do to improve your gameplay. The first one is managing your civics tree and your technology tree, but in this case the civics tree. So you can see here that this past term we've passed the point at which the bonus is going to finish off the research. Now, of course, if you're not playing on the base vanilla rules, then you actually need 60% research to get the 40% boost, so we wouldn't quite be there. But in either case, if the secondary bar that you can see here, which is a little bit faded, gets all the way to complete, then you know that if you were to get this bonus, then you're going to complete that research. So there's no point in continuing to research it turn after turn after turn if you know within the next few turns you're going to actually complete that bonus. So when you recognize that, and sometimes you'll miss it, sometimes you won't recognize it, and that's fine. It's not something that you have to do every single turn, but particularly early in the game, it's something that you can keep a close eye on. So what we'll do is if we switch to researching this, we know that we're going to get all that research for free, so there's no point in doing it. And so there you go. We have foreign trade started, and craftsmanship will be finished as soon as we build the camp on this fur and come down here and build this pasture, as we spoke of before. The other thing really quickly I wanted to talk about was discussing the idea of purchasing tiles. So when you come into a city, you can click on this little icon here that says purchase tile, and we can, you can see here, spend our gold to buy tiles. And early on, particularly in your capital or when you're trying to place your districts in the optimal locations, it is particularly important to make sure you're finding good places and spending your gold to get better tiles for your city. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to purchase this tile here, and I'm going to purchase this tile here. And the reason I'm going to do that is there's 3 mountains adjacent to this tile. And for each mountain adjacent to a campus, which is going to be the first district we build in this particular case, you get bonus science. So whenever you're considering where to put your districts, if you have mountains in the area, making sure you put your district there versus anywhere else is very important. If we were to put our science district anywhere around the city center here, or even just right next to it here, where there happens to be 1 mountain, well, that's 1 adjacency, so that's going to be +1 science. But this here means 2 more science every single turn. Plus, later on, you'll be able to use a card that will actually double that number. So instead of getting 2 here, you'll be getting 6 here. So we're going to spend 150 gold right now in order to get way more science every single turn for the rest of the game. So those are strategic things that, although it's a little bit beyond the basics, it is important to keep in mind about, okay, how do I spend this gold, right? We've got these currencies up here. How do I use them? Okay, well, here's gold, and this is how you can spend it. And it's an important thing to keep in mind. Another thing you can do as well is if you have a really good tile, like this beautiful tile right here, if this tile happened to be in and around this area and we hadn't gotten our borders expanded there yet, then that would be another good way to go ahead and click that button if you had the money and buy that tile. So that instead of working a 2-1 tile, you're working a 3-2 tile with a gold on it. That's a really big difference to keep in mind when you're trying to get early growth in your city, that early first, 30, 40, 50 turns of a game when you're trying to get everything to go moving as quickly as possible. It's an important thing to keep in mind. And you might be wondering, okay, well, it's not time to build our campus quite yet. Why am I buying those tiles now? Well, you'll see that throughout a game, the cost of purchasing these tiles goes up. So if you were to wait 3 or 4 or 5 more turns, it might have actually been 65 and 95 gold. So it would have been 10 more gold to purchase them. We had the gold now, so we spend it now knowing we're going to do it anyway. So, one final thing that I'd like to discuss before we wrap up this Civilization 6 Basics tutorial is the idea of Great People. So if you come up here to the top left-hand corner of the screen, you're going to see the Great People button. You just click on that and it's going to open up this menu right here, which has 9 categories of Great People. And you can see at the bottom that you acquire these Great People by accumulating Great People points. And the primary method of accumulating these great people points is building the corresponding district to each category. So for the great generals, you're going to want to build the encampment district and the buildings that go inside them. Once you've accumulated enough points to get a great general, you're going to get a unit that gives you additional combat strength and movement to your units based on the corresponding era of that general. So the units that are from that era will get those boosts. So if you're going to go for a military type victory, or you do plan on building a lot of units and going to do a lot of wars, then building the encampment is going to be an important district for you in your game. Conversely, the Great Admiral does a very similar thing, but for your boats in the water. So your navy will get boosts from your Great Admirals by providing additional combat strength and movement, and you get those by building the harbor districts in your cities to get the great points. Great people points, I should say. The Great Engineers are acquired by producing the industrial district and the buildings that go inside them. And they provide boosts that range from boosts to your industrial buildings to improving the abilities of your cities, and also giving you boosts towards the construction of great wonders and a number of other things as well. I won't go through the entire list. Great merchants. They are acquired by producing the districts of the commerce variety and the buildings that go inside them. And once you've built enough commercial districts and the buildings that go inside them and you've accumulated the points, you will get great merchants, which provide, among other things, gold, boosts to your commercial buildings, and free trade routes. Great profits are acquired by accumulating the great profit points, which you get from building the holy districts. The holy site district is the primary manner in which you gain these points, and you can only found a religion by acquiring a great profit. And other than building the Stonehenge wonder early in the game, you cannot found that religion without these great profits, which are acquired through the holy sites. Next is the great scientists. Those are acquired by producing the campus district and the buildings that go inside them. And among other things, great scientists allow you to get boosts and eurekas and such to your science tree, as well as providing free buildings inside your campuses or boosts to those campuses as well. So there's a lot of really interesting scientists that you'll want to go for if you're trying to get your science game going. And finally, there are 3 culture-based great people. There's the great writers, great artists, and great musicians, and they are all acquired by building the theater square and the corresponding buildings inside them. So for great writers, you get additional great writer points by building the amphitheater, great artists by producing the museums, and then the great musicians are acquired later in the game by building the broadcast tower. So is the more you provide great people points to these, the faster you'll get the corresponding great people. Great writers will provide you with 2 great pieces of writing, which will provide you with culture and tourism. So if you're attempting to win a tourism/culture victory, then you will get substantial bonuses from these guys. Great artists as well provide you with 3 great pieces of artwork, which is also a very good thing for tourism. And then, of course, finally, the great musicians provide you with 2 pieces of great music, which can go inside your broadcast towers as well as a number of other places. And again, all 3 of these will provide you with tourism and culture that will help you not only expand your borders culturally, but also to provide influence on other civilizations to have their people become tourists in your lands. So that right there is how the great people work at the very base level. You can see down here that if you accumulate enough gold or faith, you can actually purchase them as in addition to in getting the points. But of course, the prices are very, very high until you provide points. So you can get, like, say 3/4 or 80% or 90% of the points, and then at the very end, just use a little bit of extra gold or faith to complete the acquisition of said great person. So, building districts. I'm not going to dive deep into this at all. I just want to say that we did complete the campus, And what you can do is you can see here there's a library. And if you look there, it'll say +1 great scientist point per turn. So if we click on that and build this library in 8 turns, in addition to the 1 point we're getting for having built the campus, we'll also be getting +1 point for building a library. So that will be a total of +2 points every single turn towards earning a great scientist. And that's how you do it. Okay, folks, that is the end of this Civilization 6 Basics tutorial. I really do hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope that it's provided you with the information you need to tackle your next Civilization 6 playthrough with more confidence as you implement the knowledge you've learned. Also, don't forget, there are a lot more tutorials for Civilization 6 in the works, including the very next tutorial, which will be more Civilization 6 Basics. And that will include, amongst other things, city-states, trade routes, and amenities. So be sure to check that out. It will be available very soon, or perhaps already is. And if so, you should be able to find a link to it on the screen in just a few moments. If you've enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, please consider helping me out by clicking that like button. Also, if you want to be sure not to miss any of the Civilization 6 content that gets posted daily, be sure to subscribe to the channel as well. And finally, if you've got any questions about this video or would like to request a particular topic that you'd like to see covered in a future tutorial, be sure to leave a comment below. Thanks for being here, folks, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.